Fauzi, thank you so much for being here on Backstories today.
Thanks,
on
John.
this sublime autumn day in Bloomington. So we're going to talk about the opera L'Enfant et le Sortilège by Ravel. Would you just start by telling us a little bit about what the story is about and the opera?
Sure. So L'Enfant et le Sortilège, at its very core, is a story about, I guess, compassion and transformation, right? It's a story of a child, a very mischievous child, in a fit of anger, and decides to just destroy everything, books and furniture, and torments animals and whatnot. So as the story continues, these characters all of a sudden just come to life, and then decide to torment this child and torture this child in a way for everything that this child has done. And as the story continues to go to the end, eventually this child realizes what compassion really is, and what it's like to be a good human being in a difficult world.
How did Ravel and Colette, the brilliant artist and playwright, and she did so many other things,
No,
of
for
course.
sure.
She was
Definitely.
a true Renaissance
Absolutely.
woman. How did they come to work together on this opera?
It's a good question. They actually weren't supposed to. Colette wrote this very quickly, and it's funny because after she wrote the text, they actually asked her to place it to music as well, and she believed that she probably was not the best person to do that, and that somebody else perhaps should write the music for this work. And his name was Jacques Rocher, and he was the director of the Paris Opera at the time. And he actually introduced them. Now, they never worked together, right? But the moment that these two were paired together and they began working together, there was this incredible, I want to say, creative chemistry between the two. I mean, you've got Colette with her, as you know, as you was just saying, as whimsical, psychological, rich art of storytelling, something that she was really known for. But then with Ravel, you have this masterful music maker, right? And for them to be paired together was perfect. It was a perfect pairing, and then you have this incredible output at the end with L'Enfant. So.
Colette ambitiously completed the original text in just over a week. However, it wasn't so easygoing for Ravel. What were some of the events in his life that were holding up the creative process?
Well, you're certainly right. I mean, it was 8 days. She did it in 8 days. And, she was actually worried that the music was never going to happen. Ravel went through a lot during that period of his life, a lot of life events. In fact, it's very interesting because he was about to start writing in L'Enfant, and then he was called to serve as an ambulance driver in World War I, which a lot of people don't know, which is really an interesting story. But the fact of the matter is that experience took a real emotional strain on his body. And then he also became very ill many times over, and he had to take that time to recover, of course, so that took a long period of time. And as if that were enough, I mean, sadly his mother passes away, and he was very close to her, and so that as well took an emotional toll on his body. So it took him a while, actually, to get back. When he decided to return to L'Enfant, I think, in fact, it was these experiences, in all honesty, that made this work in particular really emotionally deep and tender. So, experiences are what they are, but it helped shape this work.
And how is the music influenced by American operetta?
So Ravel loved American culture. He loved American jazz. He was a huge fan of the popular music of the 1920s, and he was adamant about incorporating that music into this work. I mean, we're talking about ragtime, right, and foxtrot, and that's all in there, and he wanted to make sure that there was that American influence, and because of that, the work in itself is very playful, and it's very joyful, right, and a very light-hearted work, but also, I would say it was very modern for its time, because he made this an international work. He's incorporating the American influences, of course, that he loved, but it's also French, right? Very much so. So to make this international work, even though it was modern, it was written so perfectly that it stands the test of time.
For a relatively short piece, the cast of characters is rather robust. What are some of the inventive ways that Ravel represents the characters in the score, not only through instrumentation, but also the voice types?
Right. So Ravel was a master of, orchestral color. You could see the genius in every single bar. And so when it comes to orchestration and voice type, he does what I like to call creating a sound world. So each character is within that sound world. So you have the teapot and the teacup, for example. They have this incredible, witty, playful duet, if you will. You've got the fire character, which is this coloratura soprano with sparkling, fiery runs throughout the work, completely different than the teapot and the teacup. You've got the cats. The cats is a lot of fun because they are a sly parody, perhaps, into Love Duet, where they're playing against each other, all inclusive with cat meows and then the slinky clarinet lines and the clarinets in the orchestra. So each voice type and orchestration perfectly matches each character's personality, and so what makes that so special is that it just makes this piece an incredible living storybook, if you will.
Is it fair to say that there's a fair amount of exoticism in his music?
Well, sure, because you have to see that what makes it exotic is the fact that he's incorporating elements and influences not exclusively French, right? As we were saying earlier, American, even some German influences as well. And so because of that, it's, like I was saying earlier, a true international piece. Yeah.
Dance is rather inherent in this score, and I know that Balanchine was the original choreographer,
Right.
of course.
Right.
How is dance exemplified in the score?
Well, dance permeates in this piece. I mean, really, dance is expertly choreographed in every single scene of this work through rhythm and motion, right? Again, like I was saying earlier, ragtime, even blues, you could see in this work, and a march, if you will. All of that is because Ravel wanted to make sure that the music did not accompany the story necessarily, but actually moved the story. And he wanted to make sure that dance was a character in its own, the music was a character in its own. So you have the characters of the story, and then you have the music, and he made it in a way that he could interweave those two together. And that's what makes it so incredible, right, to see it live, because if you come and watch the performance, it's so vivid on stage, unlike you would a recording. So that's why I would impress on everybody to come and see this performance live. It's something that you could not see or hear, aside from being there in the moment.
Magnificent. So you've chosen to perform Bolero
Right.
as somewhat of an overture. Tell us what makes this a good pairing.
It's amazing, Bolero as an overture. I've never, Bolero is one of the greatest masterpieces ever to have been written. So, to me, it's equally weighted in a way. And the reason why, it was a fitting pairing for this program. And first of all, it's the 150th anniversary of Ravel's birth, so it's fitting to have a program surrounding, Ravel's work. But also, Ravel both pieces are unmistakably Ravel. I mean, he was obsessed with orchestral color and texture. So when you think about Bolero, right, it is a study of orchestral texture, right? This hypnotic build, this gradual crescendo, if you will. And then you move on to L'Enfant, which is completely different, a man that showcases his masterful storytelling, if you will. So again, two types of Ravel. One, the meticulous craftsman, and then the masterful musical storyteller. But even beyond Ravel and how these pieces fit so well together, they are both irresistibly French, right, in a way. I mean, in their elegance and their imagination.
You mentioned the lesson of compassion earlier. What other morals, if any, do you think are gleaned at the end of this piece?
So if I were to put it all down to one word, by the end of the opera, I would say the child learns empathy in a way. You know, the child has gone through all of this torture from these characters throughout the entire work, but then yet at some point towards the end of the opera, there is this moment, right, where we have this wounded squirrel. And then the child actually helps this wounded squirrel. And then all of a sudden, the world around this child, the characters around this child, all of a sudden express forgiveness, right? And everything changes. And that's the lesson, right? So I guess for me, and it's a good lesson for all of us, in the fact that, you know, compassion and empathy, even in its smallest gestures, always has power to heal.
Fawzi Haymor, thank you so much for joining us on Backstories today and sharing a little bit about L'Enfant et le Sortilège, opening October 17th at the Musical Arts Center. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.